another few years of lifespan to achieve a reduction in plastic pollution entering the ocean from this part of the world and increase livelihood for informal sector workers.
Thanks. So thinking about the systems level, I think we have a few who are working on the more localized solutions here in Thailand. And then thanks, Matteo, for bringing in the systems perspective. So I'll go to Dominic from Precious Plastics Bangkok.
Sure thing. Thanks very much. Yes, so my name is Dominic and I'm the director of Precious Plastic Bangkok. And so we are a community-based recycling outfit based in Bangkok, but we have workspaces all over Bangkok, all over Thailand, in fact, that now work with local communities to collect plastic trash that's literally on their doorstep. And then we have a range of machines which we then install in those communities. So those communities can actually recycle that plastic into new products. And so what we do is we have blueprints which are available online for free. Anyone can download these blueprints and start producing these machines using, very rudimentary metalworking tools, your own workspace in your local community, for example, actually manufacturing these machines, and then literally turning trash into cash. So it's a really exciting venture, and we've now got 7 communities that we're working with. The other way that we work, we also do workshops with schools and universities. So we will go to international schools and local Thai schools as well, and do educational workshops with the students so that they can actually see the entire supply chain and our entire process right before their eyes. So it's a really nice way for them to understand more about plastic recycling efforts and how they can get involved as a school. And then the third way that we work, we also have a drop-off network. We also work with Nat from Trash Lucky on this to have drop-off networks and locations all across the city to try and make plastic recycling as easy and convenient and as cheap as possible for people. So if they're on the way to work, on the way home, they can just drop their plastic off at their favorite cafe, their restaurant, for example, and then that plastic can then come to community outfits such as us. So yeah, thank you very much for having me.
Great, thank you. And now for our final panelist, but definitely not least, Archawat from Etran.
Hi, thank you, Laura. Everybody, my name is Om. The best way to describe what I do is I'm a corporate executive by day and a startup by night. I'm checking the clock now, it's 6 o'clock and 12, so I'm going to be wearing my startup hat. I'm an executive chairman of a mobility company called Etrans. It is the first EV company that, we have our product developed, designed, and manufactured in Thailand. Our brand is Etran. It's coming to the market really, really soon. We want to make sure that, our mission is to drive the cleanest, the most efficient, and the most equitable futures for the world. Our product, being EV, is come with much less environmental impact, but we want to make sure that, the product is being widely available for a lot of folks. So we're coming out with an innovative business model by renting, the high-performing EV bike for 150 baht per day. So that is coming up next month. You may wonder, what is EV has anything to do with this session? So a little bit on my day job, I also lead sustainability initiative for brand like Coca-Cola and Pepsi. So I'm involved quite a bit on, how large organizations is thinking about plastic waste and thinking about how they can use their, size to help address, this very complex issue. I work with, people like Matteo, the Incubation Network, or the Circulate Capital, the investment arms to invest in solutions, or the Alliance in Plastic Waste, where we're looking at the larger scales of plastic waste solutions around the world. So I hope so many years dealing with plastic, not only recycle but reimagine. How can we change a business model in order to make sure that we don't generate waste unnecessary. hope that I'll be able to share, a few things that I learned along the over the years, with you guys as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate you sharing. Laura, should we go ahead and jump into questions here?
Yeah, please. Over to you, Chris.
Okay, so I think I'd like to start off with a question that maybe Nat could look at from the on-the-ground perspective, and maybe Matteo could look at it from a big picture perspective for us. The others are obviously welcome to jump in. So what do you see as key challenges around plastic waste, and what are the forces driving those challenges?
Okay, well, from what I see, working with our members. So our members are, we have various segments of members. So school students, we have low-income communities, we have residential communities like gated community versus condo, and then we just have basically any individuals who's like living in city and want to recycle with us. I think for a lot of people that started to recycle with us, they're like the eco-conscious people. Those people are already in, to this movement of, reduce, reuse, recycle. But if we look at the mass, I think the challenge there is in the behavior of the mass consumer, which is still reliant on convenience. So, the world has moved into a one-click on-demand kind of button. So, and that really fuels like plastic, single-use plastic waste, and also packaging as well. So, that's one. I think that's one major challenge. Basically, consumer preference of convenience. The second thing is probably education. Do they know what impact do they actually create by choosing to use or consume that single-use plastic? Do they even know how to identify the different types of plastic? A lot of time when we hold workshops, people don't even know that there's what the recycling symbol in triangular arrows and number inside means. They're like, oh, really? I've never seen this before, even though it's literally on almost like every plastic packaging. And then the third would be kind of like the infrastructure, the let's say formal. Okay, like we know in Southeast Asia, recycling is done by informal sector, but like the formal recycling infrastructure, similar to the developed country where you have different type of trucks coming in, collecting different types of trash on a different day, recyclables versus non-recyclables versus hazardous waste. Those are still not there either. So I would say those are like the let's say like the three big factors, challenges that I see.
Yeah, I think we don't have the systems in place, and for a lot of the things that we need. So the waste cans kind of become the easy button, right? And just gone, and the problem's over. Matteo, could you kind of add on from your perspective to that, what the problems are?
Yeah, that's actually a great point, and I think Nat, you pointed out three really important challenges. From our perspective, what we see is also a challenge in a sense that the market forces are not coming to the rescue, if you will, of the plastic waste problem. So plastic waste is, in our opinion, an expression of a market failure. Producers and brands are benefiting from this great material, this really miracle material, but nobody is responsible for the negative externalities that are coming out of the end of life or overuse of the materials. Things like cost of natural environment degradation, clogged sinks with consequent floodings, all of those are picked up by the community at large, by society at large. We pay them with our taxes, building infrastructure, and so on and so forth. And so what we are trying to address here for this challenge is really trying to understand, working at the system level, how to stimulate market response, how to ensure that there are market signals that are, for instance, helping to put a price on flexible materials, packaging like crisps or crisp packages or multi-layer packaging that are really hard to recycle because there is no value, no inherent value in them being picked up, and they end up either in landfill or more likely in the environment. What are the products that can be used? How might we create as the incubation network and support creators like precious plastics or collection methods, or even market systems that are actually creating a value for that material so that that material doesn't stay in the environment and leak in the environment itself. So that's one big challenge that we see, how to stimulate and create market systems that are basically creating a pool for those materials that otherwise would leak into the environment.
Thanks.
Thank you, Matteo. Really quick comment, Laura, just want to make sure I point this out for everyone. There's one of the reasons we really like working with TIN is the fact that you guys come at this from a systems perspective, as we do. We're not looking for point solutions. We're looking to try to change systems that lead to the outcomes we're looking for. So if that's new to you guys, please come to our future sessions and learn a little more, because it's a really interesting way to look at that. So thanks, Matteo. Laura, go ahead. Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chris, for the reminder. And I just want to remind everybody also that we have the chat going and there's some questions there already, but we would like this to be, a dynamic session. So please, if things come up as we're talking, we can work them in. And then we also have in mind to go to a bit more personalized or smaller breakout room sessions in a little while. So stay on the line for that. So I'd like to turn to Kumon from Etran and also the work you're doing with brands and talking about the transition to a circular economy. Are there losers in this transition? And from your perspective, what do you see and how can we mitigate those challenges? And this can be for anyone on the panel as well, but love to start with you,
Right. I think if you are not careful on how you want to design, this circular system, there will be losers, right? But it doesn't have to be. For example, in some of the work that we do, we try to stimulate collection for recycle activities, right? We feel that if we give enough financial incentive, folks will be more inclined, to engage in collection for recycles. What we don't know is, the financial incentive that we put in one place or in one spot within that value chain, it could be disruptive somewhere else within that value chain, right? Is with the intention that it will create a positive reaction where people want to collect for recycle. Yes, it does there, but then it's create some kind of economic disruption, in the area where such support is not there. So this is the part where I say that, when you try to build, the value chain or economic system, for collect to recycle, you really have to have a very good understanding of who does what, where, and when, and how. You have to have a good understanding once you start, intervening with the flow of the economic values, how would that, impact the rest of the value chain? And I think in order to make sure that there's no losers, in this circular economy that we are aspiring to build, we all cannot just sit in our office and try to build it. It's going to be a series of trial and errors, right? That's why we're working with Matteo and his organization to give it a try, to see if we do this, what happened, in the rest of the markets, right? Making sure that once we understand that, our, interjection with well-intention can create what kind of disruption, and how can we, prevent that disruption from happening, in the next round of our experiments. I think if you do that a few times, you'll be able to identify, where is that Goldilocks of, what is the right kind of intersection at which parts, of the value chain that can actually make sure that everybody's, is being brought up, in terms of not only the collective for recycle activity, but also the quality of life that everybody is having, being part of that value chain.
Thanks. I wonder if you or others have an example of a Goldilocks approach that's been I know some of the work that Trash Lucky is doing is, Nat was also speaking about the supporting and making sure that the informal waste picker community is part of the consideration. But perhaps Dominic or others, you have an example of something that's been tested that does achieve this this kind of Goldilocks effect of having not only the effect in reducing the plastic pollution, but also enabling an economic win for the communities involved. Feel free to come in.
Yeah, I could take that if you like.
Thanks. Yeah.
And I think if you look at the community-based approach that Precious Plastic is so keen to scale up, if you look at what we're trying to do with these individuals and with these communities, it really is all about empowerment, making sure that they feel that they're part of the solution, so that they actually feel that they can actually benefit from this technology and from having these machines actually in their community. Without that sense of empowerment and sense of involvement and participation, it's very difficult for anyone to adopt anything. So I think that's always been our core message, is always making sure that whenever we are engaging with communities, it's always part of an ongoing consultation, and that the machines are being adapted to their specific needs, and they can be tailored. So I think that's really important consideration with any project. And any sort of node within this circular economy approach is always making sure that it's very easy for people to uptake technology or uptake the new, I guess, system that you're trying to develop.
Thanks. Other examples, or Matteo or Nat, do you want to come in on that? Or over to you, Chris.
Sure. So I'd like to ask if you guys are seeing any interesting developments with plastic solutions. You guys are intimately connected with this sector. So I know, Matteo, you guys have all kinds of different stuff going on. Maybe you could share some interesting stuff you're seeing.
Absolutely. We're seeing a lot of stuff, which actually is super exciting. And interestingly enough, we're seeing it feels like there is a bit of a tipping point feeling. So it looks like people are really realizing that we really cannot go on using the same approach that worked for the past 50 years. This linear approach, take, make, use, dispose, it just has reached the end of its usability. And so we see more and more opportunities and solutions coming up all around us. And Chris, as you know, we work at the systems level, so we are really in this privileged position where we interact with policymakers, we interact with the private sector, the public sector, researcher, early stage company, mature company. We see work in the upstream space, so companies that are basically innovating on materials, and this time actually taking in account the end of life of the materials they are developing, which is something that unfortunately kind of the fossil-based plastic has conveniently forgotten 60, 70 years ago when they were initially developed, these polymers. So we see materials that have similar characteristics as the ones that are being that they are so crucial for the success of plastic in products, in materials that are able to then degrade or disappear in the environment within a shorter span of time. We see innovation in business models as well. Really interesting developments around, say, breaking the linkage between buying a product and at the same time bringing home a piece of what becomes a piece of trash, piece of plastic waste. Why do I need to buy, every time I buy a bottle of shampoo, why do I need to bring home a piece of plastic waste? If I have a convenient and financially viable solution to refill a bottle, obviously I can break that one-to-one link. And we're seeing very many of these really challenging and complex business models being developed in the region. There are several other solutions that are actually looking at incentivizing the informal and digitizing the informal sector workers. So how do we elevate, augment the capability of the informal sector workers so that we can guide them, help them, maximize their potential for income, as well as extracting data, which is a major area of concern, a major missing area in the entire value chain of plastic recycling. So really, I can go on, Chris, for hours. So I just don't want to hog the whole time, but there is a lot of really bubbling and exciting developments in this region around solutions for plastic.
Thank you, Matteo. I think most of us would be happy to sit and listen to you tell those stories for hours, but I guess we should be polite to the rest of the panelists and move on. Does anyone else have anything to add on interesting developments you're seeing?
I'd like to add a little bit, Chris, if I may. You know, from you know, what I'm excited the most about, you know, the recent development is a lot of brands, international brands, multinational companies are really understand, you know, the scale of the problem and also understand their roles of how to be part of the solutions, right? If you notice, a lot of brands, international brands, are have a targets of what they want to do in terms of reduce, you know, the plastic use or the amount of plastic being recycled. That in itself is toward the positive direction. But what excites me the most is these companies, you know, many of them are rival in the marketplace, but they are actually coming together, right, and really try to build a systematic solutions, you know, to waste management, right? Some of them are just coming together as you know, kind of a loose association, you know, experimenting, you know, what companies like ours can work together and try to do. Some of them are just coming together as an for circulate capital, you know, working with to look for solutions, either startup or SMEs, or even
recording in progress.
What I think, you know, will excite me at the next level is now that, you know, brands are coming together, even though they were rival in the marketplace, but they shook hands and said we have to solve this together. But there's a lot of small notes like this happening within the government, within other, you know, segment of private sectors. The next level of excitement for me would be how can we connect all of them, right? Because we are all trying to solve the same problem, right? And we are all talking about we have to do this at scale, and we said how complex it is. I think that's the next thing that we need to try to achieve is, you know, to bring everybody together, government included, right? Said, look, you know, we all have the same goals, slightly different approach, but we are putting our resource, time and money and effort in here. Why don't we just pool resource and try to do this together? Because at the end of the day, if you want to move the society as a whole, right, you almost need to have, you know, a one playbook, right? If you want to deal with this problem, this is how we all going to do it, you know, in the same way, in order to get the scale and the impact. So I hope, you know, the next level of excitement that I expect to see in the future is you see more and more of this larger organization coming together and try to drive, you know, a united kind of solutions that is coming.
Got a couple of interesting comments and questions in the chat building on that. So AIM is asking if you would please share examples of how brands are joining forces in reducing plastic waste and hear about the support from consumer standpoints. And then we also have a question from Naren asking about collaborative innovation approaches to scale up innovations in this sector quickly. So maybe if you could talk about that a little bit more and we could pass that question around the table.
Sure. You know, reducing plastic is a good business, right? It's meaning that you reducing costs as well, you know, from the business perspective, and also reducing plastic waste is also a good business, right? Many brands are working together across Southeast Asia. You hear these terms called producer responsibility organizations. You know, these are brands, different brands coming together. You know, in Malaysia, Indonesia, you see like 12, 15, 20 something brands of consumer goods products are coming together and really try to figure it out, you know, what is broken in our recycling value chains and how to fix it. And they are really using their financial resources to try to fix it. They're really using their brands, and capability to communicate to try to raise awareness and help people understand, how to recycle better. I think at the end of the day, everybody, all the brands, what they're trying to do is, to fix the system of broken, value chains, and then move to, more of a consumer facing, build understanding, and so come up with ways that folks can, collect and recycle, their post-consumption materials in the most convenient way possible. And I think, that is almost like coming full circle, right? Because the reason that plastic is so popular, because it is very convenient to use, right? It's light, it's cheap, it's protect your product. And if we can, make recycling plastic as convenient as how we are using them, I think that is what brands are also trying to achieve as well.
Thank you. Nat, maybe I know you've looked at a lot of different partnerships. Do you have any interesting insights to share around that?
Just about partnership in general, or what is
the for improving outcomes around plastic waste? What any thoughts about how to make the partnerships work better, and so that we get more of the resources and different perspectives together working on these problems?
I think so first I'll start with where we are in the supply chain first. So where we're in the supply chain is to incentivize people to basically recycle. So we're basically aggregating materials and then sending it to the final destination of recycling factories. Now, with that, our partnership with corporates or other sponsor is about how to get people within their community to adopt like these 3 R's, right? Like, we know that reduce and reuse is better solution than recycling, but people in Thailand don't even recycling, and it's the easiest step. So we're trying to get them to take that easy step first, and then move them into the more difficult step. I think what would make kind of partnership flow better is like the commitment, right? Like so a lot of time when we approach like big corporates about doing recycling program for their firms, for their companies, or even like get their sponsorship for school or for a low income community, for example. A lot of time what they say is like, well, we have a commitment to reduce our plastic impact X% by 2030 or whatever. But then when we ask about, okay, well, what about what kind of investment or what kind of a budget do you have to support initiatives like this? And they were like, oh, we have like a 2-people team or 3-people team and very limited budget. And right now, even though we aim to reduce our product or plastic waste by let's say like 30% within 2030, and we're at 4% now, but I don't see that money, right, being committed into getting there. So I think that like having and this is only from my perspective, from my experience of talking to different brands, asking for partnership and sponsorship. So like it may not reflect other brands, other company that I haven't talked to, or like the overall market, but I'm just sharing like what I've seen, right? So basically what I've seen is people say, or corporates say they want to commit reducing X, but I don't see like a solid commitment and investment that, okay, to get there we need to invest so and so every year to get there, kind of the budget wise.
Yeah. Matteo, could you give us a little bit of your thoughts about the importance of partnerships in trying to deal with systems problems around plastic? and maybe some thoughts about how to make that stuff work better?
I wish, Chris, I wish I had the answer for that, the right answer for that.
Not easy.
Not easy, not easy. But not being easy, it actually reinforces the fact that this is a systemic problem, needs to be addressed at the systemic level. So I think what and Nat mentioned is really, once again, it once again reinforces the fact that a point solution probably for this challenge is not going to work. And in fact, there are also some interesting questions on the chat. Both and I'm sorry for the pronunciation of the name, but Sangroj and Wina have pointed out that there is like an enormous amount of new materials that are put into the system because it's convenient and because there is no alternative. And so it's a bit like mopping the water of an overflowing bathtub without closing off the tap. It's not really a long-term solution, the mopping the floor. And so, but point solutions are not ideal. So say, for instance, we see partnership potentially across the spectrum of several ministries or policy-making entities with, for instance, the MPAPs, the national plastic prevention plans that have been started in Vietnam, as well as in Indonesia, where there is really a global approach to policy making to create an enabling environment for innovation to work. And innovation can take the form, for instance, of advanced chemical recycling or advanced recycling in general, ranging from pyrolysis, which we don't really like, all the way to advanced chemical recycling, which is actually something that can take care, if properly implemented, of some of the issues with these, very low value, very low weight materials like plastic straws or contaminated food containers, bags. Here in Singapore, coffee is often served in bags, in little bags that then are chucked away. And who will actually spend the time? Nobody will spend the time to actually reprocess those materials. Well, actually, if there were a well-organized and enforceable policy to make sure that those materials are collected and segregated, there are technologies that potentially can take those fossil-based plastics, decompose them, break them down to the level of the individual chemical blocks, even if the material is contaminated, and put them back at the beginning of the loop to basically create new plastic from these building blocks. So once again, one solution without the other probably cannot be scaled, cannot have the effect that we need to have in order to address this problem. But if we start thinking of these elements working together, and there are awful signs showing that this is happening, we can really think of system-based solutions that are taking innovation and enabling it to scale to the level of making a dent in the size of the problem of plastic pollution in this region.
Thanks, Matteo. And I want to go back to what you were saying about technological innovation and also the low value plastics and some of the questions that are coming up in the chat, and go back to Dominic and your work with precious plastics and how, first of all, how do you deal with the issues of the quality of plastic that's coming to you and to the communities that you work with, and whether or not that affects the ability to use the technology that you're working on, in terms of these machines that are able to adaptively reuse plastics. And then also, what are some of the challenges that you see in technology and innovative approaches as a solution to this challenge at the community level? So over to you, Dominic.
Yeah, thanks for that. Great question. It is very difficult because there are so many different types of plastic, and to expect communities or the uninformed consumer to, as Nat was saying, to be able to even identify what kind of plastic something is It can require infrared technology, UV technology sometimes, if you don't have that little triangle on the bottom of your bottle. So yeah, it can be a really difficult task for these communities, especially if they're completely lacking in technological expertise to identify the plastics. Also, when we've done our community-based recycling, we've been thwarted sometimes by poorly designed products. So multi-layered packaging, bottle caps as well that have little layers of silicon inside them, or many different types of plastic within the cap. And these are obviously done because it makes the product very glitzy. It might be a sports drink that you want to have to be able to drink out of, like a straw, for example. But for a recycler like us, it's a nightmare because we can't separate those plastics cost effectively. And also it can be very difficult to identify which plastics those are. So unfortunately, those caps and those poorly designed products, they have to just be chucked away. And if we're looking to move towards a circular economy, if we're talking about the losers, it would be those kinds of products which are poorly designed that need to be phased out, really.
Thank you, Dom.
Well, I'm sorry if I may just jump in with one small joke. It's like they're poorly designed from your perspective, but they're actually very well designed from the perspective of those who need glitzy marketing and colorful product on the shelf. So again, there is this dual standpoint, dual point of view that needs to be solved.
Matteo, did you want to add further?
No, that's it. It was just a small quip.
Okay, thanks.
Just very quickly, I think from what I have seen across my computer screen, the issue of hard to recycle multiple materials packagings is really big, and there's a huge effort from the industry perspective to redesign their packaging, make sure that it is now recyclable with mono materials so that it can go into recycle. Even with the different colors, as Matteo say that it may helps from the marketing perspective, but brands are now recognize that maybe you have to forego some of the marketing attractions in return for that material can be part of the recycle chains. Otherwise you're gonna end up seeing 12 colors of bottles or something like that, and that would definitely be a huge headache for recyclers for sure. But from what I have seen in terms of mix multiple layers packaging material is being looked at as that's huge effort to streamline into mono materials type of packaging, and also from the color perspective is also being coming down to maybe just the clear ones as well. So we'll see how far this will go in the future, but the effort has started, that's for sure.
Thank you. Quick question for Dom and Nat probably. In Bangkok, people often ask me, what can I recycle where I live? And I often can't tell them because it's so varied depending on where you are. Can you guys give any advice on how to figure out what's recyclable where you are in Bangkok, and how to figure that out, how to go about it to try to maximize or optimize your recycling efforts in our town?
Yeah, well, maybe I could just speak to one of the challenges that presents, or as you identify. It's incredibly complex, and there's no harmonized system in place by the councils, by the municipal authorities to say, okay, even from the color of the bins through to the icons that they use to the number of plastics that they actually accept, it can vary hugely depending on where you are, even inside Bangkok or indeed across Thailand. It's not a problem that's specific to Thailand either. Even in the UK, I grew up in London, and you'd have councils, you'd be separated by one door, and they would no longer accept certain types of plastic because you're now in Southwark Council rather than Tower Hamlets. So it's completely it's a minefield really for consumers to be able to tell, okay, what can I put in my recyclable bin and what can I put in the non-recyclables? And then the other issue is, if you're putting non-recyclables into that recycling bin, do you have the technology or the personnel to then actually remove that non-recyclable and not contaminate the entire supply? Because that sadly is what often happens. You'll have these bins turning up at the recycling facility and they have some non-recyclables in there, and it won't actually be cost effective to go through that and actually sift through and say, okay, take out that non-recyclable, take out that organic matter, and leave the rest of the recyclables to be recycled. Often you'll just see that whole bag being taken off the supply chain, either incinerated or put into landfill. So yeah, it can be really, really tricky for your everyday consumer to work out which bin to put it in and what plastic can be recycled.
Follow-on comment to that before you come up, Nat. Maybe both of you could address this. I've had a lot of people tell me, oh, just put the recyclables in your trash. They'll separate it on the truck. What would you tell those folks?
I would say that is true, but it probably won't get 100% of it. The main job of the city trash collector is to get the trash out of your home and into the next place. Now, as a bonus, if they have time, they will scavenge through your trash for the recyclables that can be sold. So definitely they won't get through 100% of the recyclables that are in your trash. Now, if you do separate it out for them, yeah, it definitely will have a high chance because it makes it easier for them to basically scavenge it out and sell it to the informal recycling supply chain. So with that comment, the answer to the early question of what can be recycled in Thailand, it's basically anything that can be sold, any recyclables that can be sold in the informal value chain. So that could be plastic, glass, paper, and metal. So plastic, mostly water bottle, PET, milk jug, HDPE, coffee cup, PP, like the kind of clear translucent ones. Food tray, if you wash it, all those can be sold in informal recycling ecosystem. Glass, paper, corrugated box, those are pretty obvious and you don't really need to identify them that much. So yeah, that would be a quick answer. Now, will it get recycled if you sort and leave it out? That's another question, like what I said before, because the city collector, city trash collector, their main job is to get the stuff out from your curbside bin.
Thank you, Nat. And my apologies for having my camera off a lot. I've been having problems with so I think with that, do we want to have one quick comment from our panelists? Any final thought on what we ought to be trying to do, or should we just jump straight into our conversations? What do you think, Laura? We've got about 40 minutes left.
Yeah, I think one quick comment would be great. We've talked about a lot of different parts of the ecosystem, and it'd be great to hear one quick thought. I think you had an idea for what that prompt could be, right?
Well, I guess just the idea is, what should, as an individual, what should we be trying to do? What should we be pushing for policy change? Should we push it at the neighborhood level? What should we try to do? And let's just go in alphabetical order. We can start with Archawat.
You can do all of the above, but you probably want to sequence which one is easiest, right? The hardest one is probably policy change, but that is also coming. But everything started home. Are we actually, let alone recycle, right? Are we actually separate our different packages, right? I think if all the household just do the work of separations, trash separations, you don't even have to go into like 5 different kinds of packagings, right? Just recyclable and non-recyclable. That would be a huge lesson of the burden, for the rest of the value chain, starting at the back of the garbage trucks, right? So that's one. Aside from doing it yourself, you know, from the policy change perspective, I believe that the government already have the roadmap. You know, I think by 2030, right, there should be, you know, there should be no packaging that is not recyclable, right? Those are not recyclable will be banned. I know that, you know, the folks over at the Federation of Thai Industries, you know, this is where, you know, everybody who manufacturing anything, you know, from goods to packaging materials, they came together and already have a huge task force trying to figure out very complex, you know, very complex value chains, you know, how this value chain can be designed in such a way that if there's a financial incentive coming through different forms, you know, either voluntary or mandatory from the government, right? How can that, you know, resources can be best utilized to make sure that not only that, you know, we recycling our materials and get rid of the waste issues, but also building a strong circular economy as well. But, you know, this stuff, as all of us have mentioned, you know, at some point during this conversation, is very, very complex. But, you know, there are people who actually, you know, many people who actually, you know, working on it already, and, you know, is likely to come out, you know, by the end of this year or early next year. So if you want to participate, right, as an individual when it comes to policy recommendation, it's probably going to be hard. But you could, if you want to do like you know, individual writing letters, stuff like that. But, you know, engage your own organization wherever you work, and see if your organization are actually part of this effort within, you know, the larger private sector within Thailand, right? And encourage your organization to be part of that effort, I would say.
Thank you. But Dom, you have a final word? And everyone, don't leave us. We are going right after this.
I think from my community perspective, I would just say that as individuals and consumers, we just need to keep on pushing every avenue that we can, whenever we go to the shops, whenever we are engaging with our supermarkets, and we can, you know, see an opportunity maybe to engage with people, engage with external stakeholders, just keep on pushing. And although the pandemic has created, you know, a massive spike in terms of plastic pollution creation, I think that all hope is not lost, and we just need to keep on making those small steps each day, and keep the pressure on, and make sure that the big corporates, and make sure that our governments haven't forgotten that we're still very concerned about this issue.
Matteo?
Completely agree with you, Dominic. Great suggestion. I mean, we get to this place because consumers every day buy 8 billion straws. Not that the solution is only in the hands of the consumer, but what I'm saying is that for one day, we all give up one straw, there will be 0 straws being put into the environment. So what I have done, and I can just bring my personal experience, I do 2 things. The first one is I looked at my household consumption of plastic and I segment it down to room by room. I look in the bathroom and I see how can I just remove plastic from the bathroom. Cannot do all at once, it's very difficult, but I start looking at a replacement for shampoo, replacement for toothbrushes made of plastic, replacement for toothpaste tubes, replacement for this, replacement for that, and really trying to kind of work out one little bit at a time. Turns out that we saved, we removed dozens and dozens of plastic containers from the system, from the waste stream. The second one is, which is kind of my all-time favorite, is I run a lot, I do long runs, and during every run, I stop and I pick up plastic bottles. Of course, here in Singapore, you can then deposit them in the appropriate recycling bin, which is not always the case. But boys, you know, I pick up thousands of plastic bottles every month. And it's a small thing, but I think with all the people running here in Singapore, if everybody would pick up one bottle from the environment for every time they train, we would have, you know, we would be halfway there. I understand it's not a systemic solution, but it's a small step that makes me feel good.
Thank you, Matteo. And Matt, your turn.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all the other panelists, and I think, you know, like to echo what Kumon say about the difficulty of changing the policy, that's probably the toughest one. Thai government just basically did like a 47% cut of government budget related to environment, right? From like 1.6 trillion to 8.5 billion baht. So, you know, it's like going against the trend of what can government do more to support this sustainability, you know, like environment issue, right? So within that budget for the environment, part of it is the budget for dealing with pollution and waste. And 3 years ago, it was 1.6 billion baht, and then now the budget for next year is 787. Let's just say 790 million baht. So, you know, like I feel like putting hopes on the government is a very long one. Not that there's no hope, but you got to be waiting for a while. So if you want to make a difference, start, you know, with yourself. Whatever Michael Jackson say, all right? So reduce, reuse, recycle. Think about every time you make a purchase decision. You know, think about can I substitute like a more environmentally friendly product? Matteo say about, you know, the toothbrush, switching to wood, or even Q-tips. Q-tips is a very easy one, right? Like paper core instead of plastic core. There's so many, like there are more and more options on the market now that's eco-friendly. Are you willing to spend a little bit more just, you know, to help reduce the waste to the earth? Right, that's like reuse, obviously, you know, plastic, reusable plastic bottles instead of single-use plastic. And if you do have to use single-use plastic, of course, sometimes it's unavoidable, right? Like, but if you do use that, then make sure that you sort it properly and recycle it.
Yeah, one thing I would add to that, while you're trying to change your own behaviors and choices, put pressure on these companies that are putting a lot of plastic out there. Prior to the pandemic, over the last couple of years leading up to it, the pressure on those firms was continually rising, and I was hearing more and more from them, please help, we've got to figure this out. Our customers are getting more and more upset. With the pandemic coming in, that pressure has gone down. We need to put the pressure back on if we want them to fix this. So please, you know, use your voice and help, because they will react to that. Okay, thank you guys. That was a really interesting conversation. Now we're going to go to my favorite part, which is where we break out and everyone gets to join the conversation. Okay, so we hope the breakout conversations were fun and that you learned something interesting. Maybe we can go around the room quickly. We got about 5 minutes or so left, and share some insights from the conversation. Anyone like to volunteer to go first?
I can get started from our breakout.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
We had a nice little discussion, you know, and identified, you know, that the discussion had a lot of old standards, but some new angles on it. And, you know, a lot came up about how we hope for more alternatives. And we spoke about being able to go up the value chain as opposed to just doing the post-consumer collection-oriented things. And how to you know, educate and identify those kinds of marketplaces, from simple things like, you know, ranking plastic footprint of deliveries and shops, so that, you know, people can choose with their pocketbook, so to speak, and put money towards companies that are doing the things that they'd like to be, and to you know, break the value chain in that, so that we kind of force design decisions to change. either on a local scale, like a restaurant choosing what takeout containers they use, or more how something is manufactured. And then in general, with the whole COVID thing, we see locally and regionally that things the recycle value chain is getting broken. That it's hard to go into neighborhoods, and people are wary of the volunteers who went in and established these infrastructures. And as COVID starts to spread around the communities, the not animosity, but people are shy on both sides. The volunteers don't want to go in there, and the community members don't want foreign people, outsiders coming in, and therefore it's hard to keep up the initiative that was started in a lot of these recycling things as well. And for people like Nat, who are collecting these things and trying to make money out of this value chain, it's a tougher sell. It becomes harder and harder. And that was ours.
Chris, I can jump in from our conversation real quick, and just echoing what David had said about the supply chain or value chain of recycling being disrupted during COVID. That's something that came up as well. And then needs to understand really the livelihood of the waste sorting and informal waste picking community, and how if those people who are a key part in this part of the world of recycling picture, if they're exiting the system for whatever reason, then that has the potential to really affect how recycling happens. But then most of our discussion was about the cutting edge of collection and aggregation, really thinking about and reminding ourselves that it really starts at design, and how we've talked a lot about end of life and recycling and reuse today, but thinking about how you have this low-hanging fruit at the design stage to and what companies are doing to utilize different markers on products that will enable infrared sensors to pick them out of various sorting systems and things like that. So a lot of exciting stuff happening, and it was great to learn more. Maybe I'll pass it on to AIM from your group. Yeah.
Right. So from our group, we have learned from Archawat about how big organizations, MNCs, are racing into trying to reduce single-use plastic. But because they are huge, it takes time. They need to do a lot of consumers and all that. I think that a few key things that I take out is we need a bit of a push from the consumer standpoint so that they get there fast, because they can't just reduce the plastic without consumer satisfaction. So they need to balance that. But having said that, there is another thing that we could learn from the corporate is that every year they will set their own KPI about environmental goal. Why not bring that down to individual like us as well? Set your own KPI on what you want to achieve this year and give yourself an incentive when you get there. I think that's a nice way to learn and individualize the things that and then we detour about the startup on how do we purposely choose the right target. Do we want to go to niche who can buy, or you want to go to mass where it will make an impact? So this is where we purposefully and intentionally design our product and target group. Thank you.
Thanks.
One other room, right?
Yeah. In our room, we talk about, to quote Kim, the apocalyptic proliferation of plastic during the COVID pandemic, and especially all the contaminated and medical waste, and the fact that often they are not recyclable, and if it's mixed, it could be very cost inefficient, and people won't sort them. So the topic after jump into all the alternatives regarding bioplastic, which could be also a fake good news if we mix in the same bin the general waste, the plastic, the bioplastic, and the fact that for each new technologies we could develop to answer the question about how to reduce the plastic pollution. We have also to assess the setbacks and be sure that this is not a worse solution than the problem at the beginning.
Thanks, Seb. Laura, any final thoughts? You?
No final thoughts. I think this was really interesting discussion. I learned a lot, and I want to say a huge thanks to all of the panelists for joining us and for taking time to stay on and discuss with us all and get into more specifics. I just wanted to put up our contact information for Circular Design Lab, as well as a few notes of other events that are happening in conjunction with Bangkok Design Week. All of these are online, so if you're interested to learn more about air pollution, there's an event later this week, as well as we'll dig back into plastics again in July. But over to you, Chris, for any final thoughts while this is up and people are maybe moving on to their next agenda.
Sure, just really quickly, a thought occurred in listening to the breakout discussions. We're talking to the zero COVID group about running a CDL workshop to try to help with some of the ongoing problems with COVID, where trying to figure out how to reduce transmission and all sorts of different things. One of them is around livelihoods and helping people continue to take care of themselves in these circumstances. I think it would be really interesting to have a group in that, if that workshop comes together, looking at the plastic waste collection systems and the effects of the pandemic, and how could we help come up with some ideas to improve the collection so that the waste collectors would hopefully be able to collect more plastic now and be a little better off financially in these challenging circumstances. So if that's potentially of interest, reach out to me and I'll definitely let you know if that comes together. Aside from that, thank you everyone. This was a lot of fun, a lot of interesting ideas. We've got Wednesday, we've got the air pollution workshop. Saturday, we've got part B of our systems innovation design workshop. You didn't have to go to part A to come to that one, so please come join us if that's of interest. And then we've got, as Laura said, a couple more in July. So I think that's it. If you want to keep up to date with us, get our newsletter or join our group on Facebook. And aside from that, thank you all for joining us. Have a great evening.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks. Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, great session.
Thank you. Bye-bye.